Alber Wesker. He is pretty much the poster boy for Resident Evil villains. He started out looking like a regular guy, just the calm, collected leader of stars in the first Resident Evil game. But from the very beginning, there was something shady about him. Turns out, he was secretly working with Umbrella, the evil pharmaceutical company behind all the bio-disasters in the series. He betrayed his team, let them face off against monsters in the mansion, and even injected himself with a prototype virus that killed him, only to come back faster, stronger, and full-on supervillain. Wesker wasn't just some random Umbrella employee. He was part of the Wesker Project, a twisted eugenics program meant to create superior humans. Dozens of children were experimented on, but Albert was one of the few survivors. After gaining his powers, he ditched Umbrella and started playing his own game, using bioweapons to reshape the world in his image. Over time, he evolved from a cold corporate guy to a full-blown megalomaniac with glowing red eyes and Matrix-style dodging skills. He's arrogant, manipulative, and always 2 steps ahead. He'll team up with you if it helps him, then backstab you the moment you're no longer useful. And somehow, he never loses his cool. Even when he's raging or mutating, he still talks like he's reading a monologue he wrote in a villain diary, with black tactical gear, slicked back blonde hair, and those signature sunglasses that he never takes off, even indoors or in pitch black labs. Once he mutates though, it gets wild. By the time of Resident Evil 5, he goes from sleek Bond villain to final boss monster. Wesker is obsessed with evolution. He genuinely thinks humanity needs a new superior breed, with himself as the blueprint. His son, Jack Mueller, shows up in Resident Evil 6 and has some of his powers, which leads to an awkward legacy, and also, fans still debate what brand of sunglasses he wears because they are that iconic. Nemesis. He is one of the most terrifying and recognizable monsters in all of Resident Evil. Introduced in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis in 1999, he's a weapon with a mission, literally. Designed by Umbrella as a next-gen tyrant, Nemesis was programmed to hunt down and eliminate all remaining STARS members, and he does it with chilling efficiency, stalking Jill Valentine through the ruins of Raccoon City while growling his iconic line, STARS. Most Resident Evil monsters lurk around corners or jump out for a scare, but Nemesis hunts you. He breaks through walls, chases you across rooms, and doesn't care if you are already limping and low on ammo. It added a whole new level of anxiety to the game. Every time you heard his heavy footsteps or that deep voice, your heart would drop. Behind the scenes, Nemesis is actually a T-103 tyrant, like Mr. X, enhanced with a parasite known as the NE-Alpha. The parasite gives him intelligence and the ability to use weapons, and as the story goes on, the parasite begins to take over more of his body, which is why his form becomes more animalistic and out of control. However, in his default form, he's this tall, hulking figure in a black biohazard suit with exposed flesh, a stitched-shut eye, and that lipless face. As he mutates, he gets more monstrous, with tentacles, claws, giant teeth, and by the end, he is basically an unstoppable kaiju made of flesh and virus. Even outside of the games, Nemesis has become a pop culture icon. He's shown up in movies, comics, action figures, and even fighting games like Marvel vs. Capcom, and fans love to hate him. Lady Dimitrescu. She is one of the most surprising breakout stars in the entire Resident Evil franchise, and she didn't even exist until Resident Evil Village in 2021. The moment she stepped into the spotlight, towering at over 9 feet tall, in her vintage white dress and wide-brimmed hat, the internet basically broke. What's wild is that Capcom had no idea just how obsessed fans would become. She was meant to be one of several lords in the game, but she completely stole the show with her elegance, menace, and unexpected charisma. Lady D isn't your traditional zombie or bioweapon, she's more like a twisted vampire aristocrat. She rules Castle Dimitrescu with an iron claw, literally, and treats her home like a gothic playground. Her backstory is tied to experiments involving the Caro parasite, courtesy of Mother Miranda, which granted her regeneration, super strength, and a thirst for human blood. She also has 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, who act like demented vampire brides. While the game never uses the word vampire, it's pretty clear where the inspiration came from. She speaks with grace and carries herself like a noble woman from a different era, but when you cross her, or kill one of her daughters, she drops the act and goes full monster. She's pure gothic brilliance. Pale skin, blood red lipstick, that long cigarette holder. It's like she stepped out of an old Hammer horror film, but was remixed through a modern biopunk lens. And then there's the height. Her intimidating stature wasn't just a gimmick, it made her presence overwhelming. And her final boss form is a giant dragon-like creature with claws, wings, and grotesque features, but somehow that only made her more legendary. Even outside the game, Lady D became a cultural moment. Memes, fan art, cosplay, thirst posts, you name it. She tapped into something rare in horror gaming, a villain that was scary, stylish, and seductive all at once. And despite being just one part of a larger game, she left an impact so strong that many players still think Village was the Lady D game. William Birkin. He is the definition of you messed around and found out. In Resident Evil, he starts out as a brilliant Umbrella scientist, one of the top minds behind the development of the G-Virus, a mutation of the original T-Virus that grants rapid evolution and insane regenerative powers. But Birkin's ambition and paranoia get the best of him. Fearing Umbrella will steal his work and dispose of him, he tries to sell the G-Virus to the US military, and when Umbrella's Black Ops team comes to take it by force and fatally wounds him, Birkin injects himself with the virus. That's where the real horror begins. Once the G-Virus hits his system, Birkin transforms into something not even remotely human. The G-Virus doesn't just turn people into zombies, it evolves them into whatever nightmare form their DNA can support. For Birkin, that means grotesque mutations across multiple stages, each one more monstrous than the last. His first form still looks vaguely human, but with a massive eyeball bulging out of his shoulder. By the second and third encounters in Resident Evil 2, he's covered in claws, tentacles, and some muscle growth. By his final form, he's an unrecognizable blob of teeth and meat, barely resembling the man he once was. And what's especially tragic is that even as a monster, Birkin isn't entirely mindless. His mutated brain fixates on finding hosts for the G-Virus, preferably his own daughter, Cherry. That twisted sense of fatherhood carries over in his actions, and it adds an eerie emotional layer to the boss fights. Design-wise, that eyeball on his shoulder is one of the most iconic and unsettling visuals in the series. The way it follows you, blinks and glows when he's about to attack. Each form of Birkin is like a progression down the evolutionary ladder. His roars, the way he crashes through walls, and the sheer tension of those encounters made him one of the most memorable boss fights in survival horror history. Birkin might not be as famous as Wesker or Nemesis, but his role in the story and his monster design make him one of the most iconic Resident Evil villains. He's a classic scientist becomes the experiment tragedy, but with a Resident Evil twist. Mr. X, also known as the Tyrant T00, he is one of the most unforgettable enemies in Resident Evil, especially after his terrifying glow-up in the Resident Evil 2 remake. He is technically just one of many tyrants created by Umbrella, designed as living weapons, but there's something about Mr. X that made him instantly iconic. He doesn't talk, he doesn't run, well, not at first, and he just follows you, relentlessly, silently, with the patience of death itself. Originally introduced in the 1998 version of Resident Evil 2, Mr. X was already a problem, crashing through walls and showing up at the worst times. But it wasn't until the 2019 remake that he fully lived up to his nightmare potential. In the remake, the game shifts gears when he arrives. You're solving puzzles, dodging zombies, feeling a bit confident, and then, bam, the wall explodes. And this guy in a trench coat and fedora walks through the debris like he's just clocked in for work. From that point on, he stalks you through the entire police station, and worse, you hear him. The heavy, slow footsteps above you, behind you, getting louder, and boy, you know he's coming. Mr. X doesn't need claws or giant eyeballs to scare you. He's the embodiment of constant pressure. You can't kill him, at least not until the very end. And he doesn't stop unless you leave the area or enter a safe room. He forces you to play differently, and if you're thinking of hiding, good luck. He'll punch through zombies just to reach you and deliver one of his brutal, bare-fisted haymakers. He's incredibly simple, but that's the genius of it. Mr. X is tall, broad, pale-skinned and emotionless, and like I mentioned, wrapped in a long black coat like some kind of undead government assassin, and of course there's that hat. His fedora became so iconic that when you shoot it off his head in the remake, it actually stays off. Capcom knew people would try. Mr. X doesn't have dialogue, a tragic backstory, or a twisted motive like other Resident Evil villains, but he doesn't need any of that. He's the thing that chases you no matter how far you run. Jack Baker. He's the mix between Southern Gothic horror with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Introduced in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, Jack is the patriarch of the Baker family, a group of seemingly backwoods cannibals living in a decaying plantation deep in the Louisiana swamp. At first glance, he's your typical horror redneck, loud, unhinged, violent, but as the game unfolds, it becomes clear there's something far more disturbing and tragic going on beneath the surface. When you first meet Jack, he's smashing your head into the floor and trying to force feed you body parts at the dinner table. But that's just the beginning. Jack stalks you to the house like a twisted version of Mr. X, except instead of being silent and emotionless, Jack talks a lot. He shouts, mocks, and laughs like he's enjoying the hunt. He'll walk through fire, burst through walls, and even drive a car straight into you during a garage boss fight. And even when you think you've killed him, he keeps coming back every single time. With a grimy button-up shirt, filthy boots, and a twisted smile that says, "I've got a chainsaw in the shed," his voice is gravelly and menacing. But he also has this weird charisma that makes him oddly compelling. He's terrifying, yes, but you can't help being fascinated by him too. Early on, he's just a seemingly invincible madman with a shovel. Later, he mutates into a sludge-covered eyeball-sprouting beast. His transformation is driven by the mold, a bioweapon infection caused by Evelyn, the real antagonist of the game. But Jack isn't just a mindless monster, he is a victim. The Bakers were a normal, loving family before they were infected, and Jack's moments of lucidity reveal a man trapped inside his own corrupted body, aware of the horrors he's committing, but powerless to stop. Alber Wesker. Introduced primarily in Resident Evil Revelations 2, Alex is the only other known survivor of the Wesker project, the same eugenics experiment that created Albert Wesker. But while Albert went full supervillain with flashy powers and world domination goals, Alex took a far more disturbing route. She wanted to cheat death by transferring her consciousness into a new host body, and to do that, she needed the perfect subject, someone who had endured the worst and survived with their mind intact. That perfect subject ended up being Natalia, a young girl who had already suffered trauma during a bioterror attack. Alex abducts her and puts her through mental and emotional torment, all in the name of her sick experiment. She's not just infecting people or unleashing monsters, she's playing God. She fakes her own death, leaves traps and notes behind like a twisted puzzle, and lets you think you've escaped her, until you realize her plan was unfolding the whole time. She's less in your face and more inside your head. Alex looks almost like a ghost version of her brother Albert. Pale skin, dark eyes, and that unsettling calmness that makes her feel more like a phantom than a person. When she loses control, near the end of Revelations 2, she mutates into a hideous creature. Cause of course, this is Resident Evil after all. But her strength as a villain lies in her human form when she's whispering in your ear, manipulating your choices, and making you question what's real. She speaks in riddles, recites poetry, especially Kafka, and acts more like a philosophical cult leader than a mad scientist. Her obsession with fear is what drives most of the game's narrative. She believes true evolution comes from those who survive overwhelming fear, and she pushes her victims just to test that theory. It's not enough for her to win, she needs to watch others break first. Lisa Trevor. She is not your typical villain. She isn't trying to destroy the world or mutate into a godlike monster. She doesn't speak and doesn't stalk you with purpose. Introduced in the 2002 remake of the original Resident Evil, Lisa wasn't in the original 1996 game, but her addition added an entire layer of psychological horror to the mansion's history and to the franchise legacy. She was just a little girl when she and her parents were invited to the Arklay estate under the guise of medical treatment. Instead, she became a human test subject for decades. Yes, decades. Umbrella scientists, including William Birkin and Alber Wesker, experimented on her over and over, injecting her with variant after variant of the progenitor and T-virus. Her body mutated grotesquely, but she never died. Instead, she kept living in a state of constant pain and mental deterioration, her mind breaking down while her body became this shambling immortal horror. Worst part, she still thought she could find her mother, and that tragic thought stayed with her, buried in whatever was left of her mind. Physically, her hunched, lurching frame is wrapped in decaying flesh and chains, and her face is hidden beneath multiple masks sewn into her own head, like she tried to keep her mother close by, stitching her skin and faces together. She makes these eerie groaning sounds and shuffles slowly, but when she grabs you, she hurts. And no matter how many bullets you pump into her, she just won't die. She can't. The developers could have just made her another boss monster, but they leaned into her story instead. Lisa isn't aggressive unless provoked. You can actually avoid fighting her altogether in some sections. She's not evil. She's a victim who became something terrifying because no one ever helped her. And when you finally learn her story through files and environmental clues, it turns her from a creepy sub-boss to one of the most tragic characters in the whole franchise. Lisa Trevor may not be a global threat or a giant monster tearing up cities, but she embodies what makes Resident Evil truly scary, the human horror underneath the bioweapons.